All right, here we go. Episode 4. I'm just a guy on the couch rambling about college football. Today, I want to focus on Michigan and Michigan State, just from a fan's perspective. That's all I am, just a random fan. We are already a quarter of the way through the season, approximately. It's kind of hard to believe, but the Big Ten season is here. So everything that happened before, in a lot of ways, I mean, it does count, but you've got your conference goals and the meat of the schedule coming up. The question is how much do we know about either of these teams? What have you seen? How are you feeling about your team as a Michigan or Michigan State fan? The early season non-conference schedule for Michigan, it's been criticized and all that, just to ad nauseum. It's just beating a dead horse at this point. So the non-conference season's over. We can kind of put that to rest. I think Michigan's just kind of a target just because they're Michigan, big name, all that. Just real quick, we all know it's Colorado State, Hawaii, and UConn. Some of these games are scheduled way in advance. So, I mean, it is what it is. Now, the Spartans, on the other hand, they started off with Western and Akron. Now, Western's a mid-level MAC team, and Akron is one of the worst teams in the country. So you can, so it's relatable to Michigan in that regard. But the Spartans went out to Washington to play the Huskies. And it was a game that actually Michigan was supposed to play in 2020. Canceled due to everything that went on in 2020. I was actually planning to go to that game. I've never been out to the Pacific Northwest, but that's over and done with. So, how are you feeling about these teams right now? It's important, I think, at this point, don't get too high or too low. So, you're Michigan. I think there's been a lot of people that are super high, which is expected. It's coming off a championship season, a lot of talent on this team. It's expected, people, and Michigan is passionate as much as the Michigan fan base is very, can be really negative at the same time. They also get overly, I'm going to say overly excited. And so Michigan State coming off that loss, you're a Michigan State fan. I think it's important to keep perspective and don't get too low. And there was a lot of negativity coming out of that. And I think that from a national and media perspective, the fact that they had Michigan State ranked and then took them all the way out of the rankings, which, side note here, I'm not a fan of polls. I haven't been since I was a kid. I don't care about the rankings and all that. So I'm not saying that matters. I just think that Michigan State kind of got, what are you going to say? I think they kind of got crapped on a little bit, as far as, okay, let's put this into perspective. If that was a different program, if that was, Michigan or I don't know, some other programs, and they went out to Washington and they got beat like that, are they going to be taken completely out of the top 25? And like I said, I don't care about rankings, but it is kind of a gauge of, it's a perception, I guess you'd say. So I want to look at the positives for both programs heading into the Big Ten season. So, on the Michigan side, The positives, they took care of business, okay? Easily. They didn't struggle. They didn't get upset. We've seen plenty of upsets. Some teams they didn't take care of business in the preseason I say preseason in the non-conference schedule. Some programs that should have won, they didn't take care of business. Michigan took care of business, made it look easy. Okay, that's what they were supposed to do. On the Michigan State side, positives coming from the non-conference schedule. Now, there's a lot of people that are saying, okay, Michigan State, they lost to Washington, and now they can learn from it. I don't know. You'd still rather be 3-0, obviously. But I understand the logic of Mel Tucker can use this as a way to light a fire under his team. You can learn from it. I get it. Maybe beating teams from the MAC 40 and 50 to nothing. Maybe you don't, I don't know. Maybe you're not going to learn from that. I don't know. I know football coaches, they learn from everything. So I'm just coming from a fan perspective here. So the Michigan quarterback drama is over with right now. And I think that's a positive because I was kind of just tired of hearing about it. It's too bad, though, that Cade McNamara got hurt. But I'm just gonna move past that. I'm gonna say, okay, the positive is we don't have to hear about the QB drama for now. Okay, it's settled. And on that note, with the offense, the positive, you look at all the weapons that this offense has. Now, a positive on the Michigan State side, Peyton Thorne. Okay, somewhat inconsistent in the first two games, and he said it in press conferences. It was called out in the media. They were calling, oh, the backup. Of course, the backup's always popular. So there was actually a little bit of whispers, and I was listening to the Lansing radio and stuff and media locally, and they were questioning things with Thorne and the Q quarterback situation and will he get replaced and all this. It's really overreaction and too quickly. But listen, okay, on the positive, from a Michigan State perspective, Peyton Thorne's a gamer. He gets beat up because the offensive line hasn't been good, and that comes from last year as well. Every time I watch, it seems like Michigan State, Peyton Thorne's just getting beat up. He gets back up, and when you give him time, he is really, really good. And so if you're a Michigan State fan, hang on to that because respect what Peyton Thorne does out there. He's tough. He's good. And a lot of teams would love to have a guy like Peyton Thorne. And with Peyton Thorne, he has good wide receivers. Now, Reed was out with an injury, and I haven't heard anything. It sounds like he's questionable, or they're not going to actually probably say before the game on tomorrow, on Saturday. He has good wide receivers. You give him time, and they've had the tight end step up as well, which has become a good target for him. So you give Peyton Thorne time, he has really good wide receivers. Now, a positive for Michigan right now, when we're heading into this Big Ten season, I'm going to say the coaching staff. This is a really, really good coaching staff. From Harbaugh, Hart, and Bellamy, Sharon Moore, Jay Harbaugh on special teams. And now they've got Mentor as the new defensive coordinator. But he comes from a background. Now I know he was in the Ravens organization, but his dad, I believe, is Rick Mentor. I hope I got this right. And coached everywhere, Cincinnati and NFL, and he good pedigree, you'd have to say. And so far, it seems like it's similar to McDonald of last year. But then again, let's take a step back and remember the competition they played. But yeah, so far, I mean, the Michigan coaching staff is really, really good. Now, I will get to something later that slightly contradicts that slightly a little bit, but I'll get to that later. But yeah, this is as good of a staff, I mean, as there is around. And on the Michigan State side, you've got to be positive about having Mel Tucker. Now I realize it's barely into his third season. His first season was during a weird 2020. He didn't even get a full chance to gather a team, and as far as having a team, and a lot of the transfers and stuff. So he hasn't even. I mean, he had last year as a full season, and starting off this year, and I realize there's still it's still early in his tenure, and he criticized himself for some of what happened against Washington. So it's early, but you've got to love his energy and the way he can relate to players. I think he can recruit well. I think he brings some excitement. And I think if you're a Michigan State fan, you're really happy right now. Until if anything changes, you're really happy right now with Mel Tucker. And you got to remember what he came into. 2019, the program was a shell of itself from what D'Antonio had built. It was in shambles, okay? Then he heads into a tough situation in 2020. So what I'm trying to say is that you've got to be happy having Mel Tucker if you're a Michigan State fan. I think the culture right now, he brings kind of a toughness, the edge. He's got that he's got that chip on his shoulder that you see with Michigan State coaches. Positive on a Michigan side, I really like their D line. The defense in general, they're playing really aggressive, but I really like that D line. So I think heading into the Big Ten season, you're a Michigan fan, you've got to love what you see from that defensive line. Now I'm going to come up with, and I'm going to call these kind of questions that you might have, questionable areas. And I'm not gonna say it's all negative. I'm just saying, hey, what are some things you might be concerned about? Obviously, on the Michigan side, if you're looking at maybe some questions, you'd say, well, they haven't been tested at all. That schedule, the games weren't close, starters haven't played a full game, they haven't been tested. So I think that's definitely something that you kind of question heading into the Big Ten season. Excuse me. Now, a big question mark on the Michigan State side, obviously, has been the defense. The secondary in particular, because I actually do like the Michigan State defensive line. Even though they're not getting a lot of pressure, I do like that line. But yeah, the secondary, and look, this has been all over the media and talked about. It's been obvious. This is going on into this second season of a really bad secondary. Now they've had injuries, okay? Injuries in the secondary. And also Jacob Slade has been out. Or against Washington, he was out, and he's one of the best defensive linemen in the Big Ten. So the whole thing about the Michigan State defense, it's another thing. Kind of like the Michigan schedule, it's been beat down, ad nauseum. Now, on the Michigan side, on questions, now there's been questions at certain spots on the offensive line, coming off one of the best offensive lines ever last season. There are some spots that are still not solidified. You've got some new pieces, there's been some injuries. There's mixed reviews when you hear what people are saying about the Michigan offensive line. Some people are like, "Oh, it's fine." They're now I think it's important that JJ McCarthy can move around a little bit. So if teams do get pressure, he can slide around a little bit. But I think that the offensive line is going to be fine, but there are some question marks. And I think part of that comes from the bar was set so high after last season. Now, on the Michigan State side, one of the questions is definitely protecting Peyton Thorne. Like I said earlier, he's a really good quarterback, but you have to protect him. You've got to give him time, and that's been an issue for Michigan State. And also, along that line, or along that note, I guess you could say, with the line, the running game. Last year, Kenneth Walker ran wild, but if you watch a lot of his runs, he did a lot of that on his own. And the offensive line last week, so the running game was basically non-existent. And maybe part of that was Michigan State got in a big hole to begin the game. So I understand. They fell behind. You've got you've got wide receiver weapons. I understand you're going to use that. You're going to try to catch up. Is the running game going to bounce back? Or is it kind of like a life after Kenneth Walker? I think they've got a couple good ones back there. But we'll see how that goes. It's still early, okay? And then another question mark on the Michigan State side is the coaching on defense. It's come under scrutiny, and people are saying, well, last year the defense was bad, and now they play a decent team, and we're totally exposed again. So there's going to be some question marks there. On the Michigan side, a question mark that I think myself and a lot of Michigan fans have is are the coaches going to kind of hold them back a little bit? And I mean, playing conservative. And it's something that Michigan has been known for a long time. Now you say, well, last year they they won a championship in the conference, went to the playoffs. How can you criticize a somewhat conservative game plan when you're winning? And I understand. And you know what? I'm old school. I'm old school. I love the running game. Less chance for mistakes, and I understand. But you've got all these wide receivers. You've got dynamic guys coming out of the backfield. Like Donovan Edwards is a really good pass catching running back. You've got get Corum out in the open field. AJ Henning. You've got a lot of weapons to work with, and you've got a young stud quarterback with a lot of potential. If you just hand the ball off up the middle all the time and along those lines, you're not using all those tools. So is the coaching staff going to hold Michigan back? And we've seen it before. And part of that is the Jim Harbaugh, that's what he likes. And how can he's had a lot of success. I'm not criticizing that. I'm actually old school myself. But when you've got this much offensive talent, you've got to try to use it. Another question mark on the Michigan side is now that Cade McNamara is injured, you've got a depth issue because the Davis Warren, who would probably be next in line, hasn't played at all. I mean, until these first few games here, he's played a little bit, but JJ McCarthy is going to have to be careful. He wants to be able to run the ball, and he has that ability, but one hit on JJ McCarthy could change this entire season for Michigan, all the potential. And I hate to even bring it up. I don't want to think about it, but he's got to be careful too, because now McNamara is out. And so that safety net is gone. And for the people that were so negative about Cade McNamara, I think it was terrible. I think it's a bad look for Michigan. I think that a lot of people are idiots sitting on your couch being negative about a championship winning quarterback. And now look at the situation. Look at the situation around the country. All these quarterbacks getting injured. If Ewers doesn't go out for Texas, they most likely would have won that game. Anyways, you see all the starting quarterbacks that have been injured. Don't take anybody for granted. And now the depth at quarterback for Michigan behind JJ McCarthy is untested. I don't care if that. Oh, Alan Bowman played a lot for Texas Tech a few years ago. Whatever. It's not going to be the same team at all. So I think that's a question mark. And then replacing Hassan Haskins. I kept saying, we're going to miss. I've been talking about his fans. We're going to miss watching Hassan Haskins. He always got positive yards, always moving forward. And now, who's going to be that guy? And I think that Edwards can. Stokes, I really like Stokes. I think he can be that guy. Because Corum, as fast as he is, he's more of the type that you want to get him out in the open field. And yeah, he's tough. He can run inside, but it's a little different than Haskins. Haskins was a workhorse. And so I think that we'll see how they work when you need those short yards or you want to eat the clock up a little bit. Who's going to be that guy? And on the Michigan State side, it related to running back note, like I said earlier, it's life after Kenneth Walker. So how is the running game from Michigan State going to go from here? All right, well, I kind of want to look ahead a little bit to now coming up to the Big Ten season. So Michigan State hosts Minnesota tomorrow afternoon. I don't know why my accent just kind of changed. Did I say Minnesota? I don't know. It's a huge game for PJ Fleck and his program. Now, Michigan State has played really good at home. It seems like, as much as I remember, when they have good teams, Michigan State, it's a good home environment. It's tough for road teams. They play well at home. I don't know why. I think Minnesota's favored in this game. And I sort of understand, but Michigan State playing at home, it's a big advantage, I feel like. And Minnesota relies on the run, which could, I don't know, if Michigan State stops the run, obviously it's going to work out. It's not going to be the downfield passing game, most likely, that we saw, unless Minnesota just totally changes their colors and says, hey, we're going to try something. We're going to try to take advantage of it. But Minnesota's also had a bad schedule. They really haven't been tested, kind of like Michigan has. And they lost the wide receiver to injury, their stud wide receiver. Now on the Michigan side, they're going to host Maryland. I think we're going to find out about the Michigan secondary. But Michigan has destroyed Maryland. The last couple games? I mean, and for the most part, when Jim Harbaugh's been there, they've destroyed Maryland. So it's going to be interesting because Michigan's first test, but it's at home. It's in Ann Arbor. I like the aggressiveness and the chip on their shoulder that this Michigan defense is playing. So it's going to be a good test for the secondary because Talia Tagovailoa he's gonna be slinging the ball around, which also gives opportunities for some interceptions. I would love to see Mike Sanders still pick one off. I love his versatility. Every time I'd see the game, I would say Mike Sanders still he's my dude right there. Um, I'm not going to look too far ahead, but then the following week, Michigan State goes to Maryland. So it's kind of this is the fun about the conference schedule is things kind of work their way out. Like this week, you were going to see what Maryland and Michigan are made of, and then that could be foreshadowing to next week when Michigan State plays at Maryland. And then Michigan's going to go to Iowa, which has always been a tough place to play in Kinnick, but it's going to be, 11 a.m. local time. And it's an Iowa team that not only got absolutely, their doors were blown off in the Big Ten championship last year by Michigan, and it's an Iowa team that has struggled so far this season. So, as a Michigan and Michigan State fans, you're kind of looking ahead now. Big Ten season's coming is here. It's here. The non-conference season is over. Time for everything to kind of shake out, and we'll see. It's time for everybody to see what you're made of. It should be fun. I'm looking forward to it. We'll get back to it. Give kind of after a few games, we'll see what these teams are made of and post again. We'll talk about it again. All right, until then, hey, have a great weekend of college football.